I'm grateful to catch your eye in this important King's Speech debate, and I follow other colleagues in congratulating both the members for Bradford West and Harlow on their amusing and well-informed speeches. One of the few things, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government has got right in the King's Speech is the expedited bill to nationalise the Scunthorpe Steelworks to safeguard domestic steel production. That plant is costing the taxpayer £1 million a day, and therefore modernisation and future private and public investment under a government-owned company needs to be implemented. However, our economy is in a very fragile state. It's only growing by 1.3% in real terms in 25, and the OBR forecasts it will only grow by 1.4% in 2026, the lowest of any G7 country. The United Kingdom is carrying one of the highest level of borrowings in the Western world. National debt is a staggering £2.9 trillion, equivalent to 93.8% of our entire GDP and equivalent to £102,000 per household. Even more concerning, we're expected to spend, wait for it, £111 billion on debt interest alone in servicing that debt. If this was a government department, it would be the third largest. We are heavily reliant on international markets, and our national balance sheet is highly leveraged. That leaves our economy dangerously exposed to external shocks, such as the war in Iran and the Ukraine conflict. As a result, our borrowing premium on that debt is one of the highest in the OECD. We're paying more in debt interest than Greece is today. A 1% rise in those interest rates adds £1.3 billion in costs in the first year and £12 billion by the end of the forecast period, as new expensive debt replaces older, cheaper debt. Indeed, 30-year gilts yesterday hit a 28-year high at 5.81%. That gives a clue as to what the international markets think of our economic standing. On that note, I note that one of the Labour leadership candidates does not have a clue how the bond market functioning our enormous debt actually works. With inflation expected to rise again, with some forecasters expecting it to reach 6.7% next year, we face the very real risk of sliding into recession or a bond strike. And if these very serious consequences were to occur, this country would be forced to take much more fundamental measures to cut our expenditure. A competent government should already be doing this to avoid any chance of this happening and our reputation in the international markets. I note the government has included a bill to reform the welfare system. 1 million people who could work but are not is causing unacceptable tax increases on the rest of the hard-working population's earnings. On top of this, higher interest rates are leading to higher food prices, mortgage payments and higher business costs. No one in this country, especially poorer working people, will be protected. Some of the issues we are seeing today are avoidable. Current political instability is a major factor. It's not my job as an opposition MP to tell the Labour how to sort out their leadership problems. But whatever they do, it is important to convince the international community and the people of this country that there is a stable, well-thought-out economic policy to give the markets confidence to reduce that current borrowing premium. It is not the job of the government to subsidise every business, but it is the duty of the government to create conditions in which growth, prosperity, enterprise and investment can thrive. The government has introduced a bill to target youth unemployment, which is welcome, but that unemployment has risen 16% or increased by 100,000 compared to a year ago, making it very hard for youngsters now leaving university or their further education to start in their working careers. Yet, businesses, particularly in hospitality and retail, are being taxed into oblivion and not hiring as many people. Can I just do this next paragraph, and I happily give way to the Honourable Lady. In my North Cotswolds constituency, we employ 3,700 people in hospitality, and it provides £220 million to the local economy. However, higher national employers' insurance contribution, rising minimum wages, hugely increasing business rates, energy increases, exacerbated by the Employment Rights Bill, are all making it harder to make profits and stalling growth. Taxes are already at a post-war high, and there are threats to hike them further. None of this environment is encouraging businesses to hire and take on more people and reduce the current high unemployment figures. I can wait, the Honourable Lady.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member for giving way, and I agree entirely. This, to me, is one of the most business-hostile environments. Would you agree with me that your comments about young people not getting work are actually made worse by the national insurance hikes that have seen almost now a generation being unable to be employed? Would you agree with me on that contention?
Well, I'm very grateful.
Let's start the term as we mean to go on. No, you or your, because it isn't me. So Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Lady, if I had to design a tax increase, there wasn't a bigger tax on jobs than the hike in national insurance, it would be just that. And I do totally agree with her. And I think it's tragic, particularly for our young people trying to get into the world of work today. As chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, my focus is on value for money for the taxpayer and to ensure that no expenditure goes to waste. Figures published by the National Audit Financial Insights in January 2026 point a deeply worrying picture. The government now spends around 1.1 trillion of taxpayers' money across 17 departments. A department's accounts are qualified, sorry, this is getting a little technical, but just bear with me just a little bit in this section of the speech, when they do not spend their budgets as Parliament intends. The Department of Work and Pensions have had their accounts qualify for 36 years because their fraud and error rate is 3.3%, costing the taxpayer a staggering £9 billion. Overall, and this is even more staggering, the government has written off close to £7 billion this year across departments, including the MOD writing off £1.5 billion on purely cancelled debt, cancelled projects. I want to just repeat that. £7 billion has been written off this year from cancelled and wasted projects. I mean, that is staggering. The PAC has consistently recommended that each department improves its digital and AI efficiencies. We believe this should be implemented from the top down and that a Chief Digital and Information Officer should be appointed at a senior level in every department and on their arm's-length bodies. This would improve efficiencies and saving. After all, every efficiency and every saving that you can make is more money to spend somewhere else. The public sector is constantly behind the private sector digitally, and we need to do much better to ensure that our public services actually deliver for taxpayers using the latest and best technology to do so. Madam Deputy Speaker, AI is a tsunami which the government is nowhere near prepared to deal with. Only 5%, and I don't mean this as a criticism of the civil servants, it is just as it is. Only 5% of the civil service have specific IT qualifications. Some experts say this needs to rise to 10%, which would be a massive transformation. The government announced a bill to reform the welfare system. This year alone, the Department for Work and Pensions budget is expected to reach a projected £330 billion, or around 23.7% of UK spending. This almost outweighs what we're receiving in income tax for payments of £330 billion from hard-working people. Just imagine that. The total amount of income tax from hard-working people almost doesn't pay for the bill for the Department of Work and Pensions. I'm aware that the pension and benefit budgets are both ballooning. This expenditure is only due to increase as we mercifully live longer and healthier lives. But somebody else mentioned we are at risk of intergenerational unfairness. There's a risk that our children will not be able to pay off this increasing debt. Yet this government has failed to take back control of this skyrocketing budget, and instead their backbenchers refuse to support such changes costing just £5 billion. Another area the PAC will be examining closely is the cost of government compensation schemes. Over their lifetime, they're expected to exceed £102 billion. This is just under what we're paying in debt interest in any one year. The government, of course, has a moral obligation to compensate citizens where the state makes serious mistakes, but we must do so in a fair, proportionate and non-litigious way. Finally, and most importantly, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to turn to defence. The first absolute duty of any government is to ensure that our nation is properly defended. The King's speech committed to NATO and a sustained increase in defence spending. Yet the Defence Investment Plan, promised from that dispatch box in June 2025 and every month since, alongside the Strategic Defence Review, has still not been published. And until we get that plan, we cannot see what the government's plans are for how they're going to procure all their military equipment that is needed.
On that point,
happily give way to my...
First of all, can I commend Honourable Dittman for his speech and what he's putting forward? Does he agree with me that one of the things that we need to be doing here within our defence here in the United Kingdom is the technology that Ukraine has in drones? Russia's under threat. They're worried about the attacks in very far into internal Russia. Does he agree that maybe we need to have a partnership with Ukraine to promote our drone technology in a way that we can be effective as they are?
I'm really grateful to my honourable friend from North Antrim for making that intervention. Strangford. I do apologise. I do apologise for. If he just is a little patient, it's 2 or 3 paragraphs down. I will address precisely that point. Currently, the defence budget for 25/6 is £62.2 billion. This is a measly 18% of the welfare budget of £333 billion. The government have pledged to increase this budget by 2.6%, or £9 billion by 2027, and 3% in the next Parliament, which means another further increase of £14 billion. But just a second, here's the punchline at this part of the speech. But none of that new money has yet arrived. I give way to my honourable gentleman.
My honourable friend for giving way. Would he agree with me that the best form of defence is peace, and the overseas development aid budget, which, as my right honourable friend earlier mentioned, is a key component to achieving peace around the world through soft power, through diplomacy, and a lot of that aid is absolutely crucial for people's survival many places around the world.
Yeah. I welcome that intervention as someone who worked under my right honourable friend for Sutton Coldfield as a junior opposition defence spokesman. I understand the value of overseas aid, and I particularly understand the elements of it that he relates to soft power. The PAC did an inquiry the other day on the BBC World Service, and I do wish the government would fund it properly. It is a really well-respected piece of British ability to be able to project our values around the world, and it's very sad when the Chinese and the Russians come in as soon as we make cuts there. So I do welcome that intervention. At a time of increasing uncertain and bellicose world, our MOD budget is in crisis, resulting in a significant number of procurement projects being put on hold. These delays will have significant cost implications, so that when and if the extra money does arrive, and that money will buy less and less equipment. Having been to Ukraine earlier this year, it is clear that we need more and more rockets, drones, interceptors, unmanned vehicles, and investment in space. Instead, some of the proposed equipments are designed for yesterday's wars, and it will remain to be seen whether the MOD will be agile enough to make those substitutions in future procurement. My honourable friend says pretty obvious. It may be pretty obvious to some, but it's not to others. To govern is to make difficult choices. In short, the government is spending more than the country can afford, funded by ever-increasing amount of debts. If we are serious about protecting our nation in an increasingly uncertain world, we must also be serious about the strength of our economy. This means bringing our unaffordable welfare bill under control, creating a stronger environment for growth, eliminating billions of pounds in waste, some of which I have identified in this speech, but if time had allowed, I could have identified billions more, and reforming how government works in the rapid rollout of digital reform. The civil service must be reorientated around productivity and efficiency. And only with stronger, leaner and more resilient economy can we fund our defences, secure our future and meet the challenges ahead.